Welcome to your new Excel superpower. Whether you're fighting messy data, combining files, or just tired of doing the same steps over and over, Power Query is here to help. Power Query is a powerful data connection technology that helps you import, clean, transform, and combine data with just a few clicks. Think of it as your data cleanup robot. It can do tasks like removing duplicates, changing column types, or merging multiple files, and it remembers what you did, so you can refresh it with new data later. Whether your data is coming from a CSV, a folder full of Excel files, or even the internet, Power Query makes it easy to automate repetitive cleanup steps. Let's dive into it. So we need to go to the data ribbon within Excel, and then within this get and transform part of the ribbon, you'll be greeted with some options on how to pull your data in. So you can see we've got common options like text or CSV files from the internet, from pictures, and if you go to this Get Data tab, you can see there's even more sources where we can choose to pull our data from. For this particular example, we're just going to be using a table within this workbook. So I'm just going to go to the Player Info worksheet. I've already made this range a table. You can use named ranges if you don't want your data within tables. And then I'm going to click from table and range, and you can see this opens up Power Query and pulls my table straight in. So now we're in the Power Query editor. On the left hand side we have a list of all our queries. You can see we only have one query here at the moment. In the middle section we have a preview of our current query, or the query you're clicked on in the queries pane. This is limited to 1,000 rows. On the right hand side we have the applied steps. Every time we make a change within this query, it will be logged as a new step. You can see at the moment we've only got 2 steps where Power Query is defining the source of our table, and then it's defining the data types of the columns. We can add to this, remove from it, or reorder it whenever we want. At the top here we have the graphical interface. Most of the common tasks within Power Query can be done using the top of the ribbon. However, if you need more advanced tasks, then you can write your own custom M code using the formula bar here. If we have a quick look at what's available to us on the ribbon, on the Home tab you can see you can choose columns, you can remove columns, you can keep or delete rows, you can sort data, you can split columns, you can group columns, you can define data types, promote headers, and we can merge and append queries. Next up on the ribbon is transform. So within here we can work with existing data and we can change the way it's displayed. So you can see we can group our data together, we can work with our headers similar to the Home tab, we can transpose, we can reverse rows, we can add indexes, define data types of columns, we can look and replace values or errors, we can fill down or up, we can pivot columns or unpivot columns, we can move data around, and we can work with lists. Within our columns we can also do splitting similar to the Home tab, we can format, we can extract, we can do statistical work, we can do manipulation with dates and times. The add column part of the ribbon is where we want to add additional columns to our table that don't exist in the source data. So you can see we can quickly add an index column, a conditional column, or we can duplicate columns, or even just format existing columns as new columns. And again, we can work with numbers, dates, times. The custom column function is a really useful feature. You'll need to know your M language to be able to write these. Think of them like writing a formula in a cell. On the View tab, a really useful feature to have on is your column quality. You can see this tells you whether you've got any problems. You'll see errors in your data if you do, or maybe you might flag empty rows that you weren't expecting. You can see here we've got 100% valid data in each of our columns. The column profile gives you more statistical analysis of your data that can be useful. And the column distribution also adds some useful information up here. I would suggest by default you leave column quality on. The advanced editor is where you can write all your code. So if you think of the applied steps field as your graphical view of the world, then inside your advanced editor, basically every single step is held within a let statement. If you're comfortable writing M language, then this is the best place to be able to build your queries. It's quicker and easier to build. The queries dependency is useful. It gives you an overview of how all your queries are interlinked within the workbook. You can see at the moment we've just got a simple flow here where we've just got one workbook and one query. However, as your queries list starts to build, this graphical view will be really useful so you can keep a track of how it's all talking to each other. Let's have a look at some common tasks in action. So you can see at the top here, we can use our filters. These look very similar and operate exactly the same as they would do in Excel. Just bear in mind that your preview is limited to 1,000 rows. It's not applicable to this small data set, but if it was, then you might not see some of your expected values just due to the size of the preview. Note when you click on a column with your right click, you get a lot of the common actions that can be done. These are the same options that we saw on the ribbon. It's just sometimes it's easier to right click and see what's available to you quickly here. We could go onto this column name and give it a new title. Notice on the applied steps, we have a new step, and that is logged that we've done our rename column. And in the formula bar, you can actually see the M language that has been used here and generated automatically by the interface. So the table.renames function has been used here. If you hover over the function, you can see a little helper prompt has now appeared. Within the rename columns function, it asks for a table as a table. So the way Power Query works is each of these steps is considered a table. So you can see where it's asking for a table, we've provided the change type table, and that's nothing more than the data set contained within this previous step. And then the second argument within the renames column function is what the existing column was called and what we want it to be called. So you can see we replace player name with player. I'm just going to click the X here to remove that step, and we're going to revert back to the original name. To finish working with this query, we can click on the close and load, and we're going to go on the close and load to. If you just click close and load, it's going to default to output to a table within Excel. We already have this data as tables within Excel, so there's no point repeating it. So we're going to go with only create connection. You can see you can also output direct to a pivot table or a pivot chart. And then you can choose where you want any of these options to display, whether existing worksheets or new worksheets. Only create a connection will maintain your query within Power Query. It just won't have any output within the workbook. We can use this add this data to the data model option if we're going to be using these queries within the data model for Power Pivot. However, for this example, we're just going to be working with queries. So I'm going to click OK. On the right hand side, we now have our queries and connections pane. If for whatever reason you've closed this, to reopen it, just go to your data tab, queries and connections, and you'll be able to see all your queries here. To get back in, we can go to data. We can double click on one of our queries. That will open the Power Query editor, or we can use the keyboard shortcut Alt and F12. I like to have it placed on my quick access toolbar, or it's buried within Get Data, Launch Power Query Editor. Give an example of a merged table. I'm going to go to this team info sheet, and I'm going to add this table to our Power Query editor. So I'm going to convert this to a table. I'm going to call this team info. We're going to click data from table range. That table is now within Power Query. So we have two tables now. We have our player info and our team info. So a good example of a merge would be with, we want to see who these players play for, but at the moment we don't have the team within the player info table. If we go to the team info table, you can see the common link between these two tables is actually the team ID. We have team ID here, we have team ID here. So what we're going to use is merge queries. You can consider this like a lookup in Excel. So if we click merge queries, this is going to prompt us with what table do we want to merge into. So this is our player info table, and then what table do we want to merge it with. So I'm going to click on the team info table. We now need to tell it which columns are going to create the relationship for us. So I'm going to click team ID in this table, team ID in this, and then the join kind, we're going to use the left outer, which is going to give us all of our rows from our first table and then only the matching rows from our second table. You can see the other types of joins are available are here. There's a fuzzy matching option, which is really useful if your data doesn't perfectly match. You can set thresholds on how similar the matches need to be. For this example, we have perfect matches, and you can see this even prompts us to say we have 8 out of 8 rows with matches. I'm going to click OK. So now we have nested tables within our original player info table, and you can see it's added a step in called merged queries. So if I was to peek into one of these tables, you can see it's matched team ID 1 for Harry Kane. It's gone into the team info table, and for team 1 you can see there's this top record here, which when we're peeking into this table, nested table, we can see that relevant record. The way to expand that record is we're going to use these arrows at the top here, and this is going to allow us to expand any of those columns within that nested table. I'm going to click on just the team name, and I'm going to untick use original column name as prefix to keep our column name short. If you have this option enabled, what it will do is it would add t_teaminfo dot team name as the new column. However, it makes the column names really long. It's a useful option if you want to keep a track of which tables they're coming from, but at the end of the day you can see which table it's come from within the formula. So I would suggest keep your column name short by unticking that. And you can see here now the equivalent of an XLOOKUP in Excel. We now have the team names based off our team IDs for all of these players. That's a table merge. Table appends are where you join sets of data together. So a common task might be weekly data that you want to consolidate into maybe a monthly view or a year to date or an annual view. So you can see in this quick example I've got week 1 stats and week 2 stats, and we just want to combine these into one table. So I'm going to add both of these into Power Query. First we're going to convert to tables. So that's those two converted to tables. I'm just going to click on this table. I'm going to go to data from table range. Now I'm just going to close and load that. Only create a connection. I'm going to do exactly the same for week 2. So now we have week 1 and 2 as queries in here. We could append these together in one of the existing queries, or we could create a new query called combined. I'm going to go to append, I'm going to click the little drop down, and I'm going to select as new. So that's going to give us a new query that combines these two tables. So you can see you can select 2 tables or 3 or more. I just need the simple view for this. We're going to go first table week 1, second table week 2. Okay, and there we have it. Those 2 tables joined into one table. I'm going to call this weekly append. Then we're going to go close and load to. I'm going to output this appended data to a table because we don't have this anywhere in the data set currently. You can see we now have week 1 and week 2 stacked together in one neat table. Note now we've set that query up, as and when our data changes, we don't need to go back in and edit the query. We can just simply refresh. Let me give you an example. I'm just going to add another player in here, Ben Jones, scored 100 goals. Go back to our weekly append data. We can right click, refresh. Note on the right hand side, the refresh took place. We now have 17 instead of 16 rows, and you can see this new entry at the bottom. You can also use these little refresh buttons against the queries to do the refreshes, or you can go in the data tab, refresh all. Final little example of how to cleanse some data. In this particular example, we've got the mixture of the player name and their position separated by a hyphen. So what we can do is we can go to the transform tab, we can go to split column, we can split it by a delimiter. The delimiter is going to be the hyphen in this case. You have these inbuilt delimiters, but we can use custom, insert the hyphen. We can choose whether we want it to appear as the first left occurrence, the right occurrence, or every single occurrence. I'm going to click OK. And there we have the player names and their positions split. You can see this record hasn't quite worked as we expected because there was a hyphen in the name. So what we could actually do is in the split column by delimiter, we could do the same again, but instead we're going to choose this time to only happen at the rightmost delimiter, and that gives us a cleaner transformation. Now that you've got the basics, you're ready to start transforming your data like a pro. In future videos, we'll go deeper, combining files, writing custom steps, and building full data pipelines. I hope you found it really useful. Please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more weekly updates. And if you've got a Power Query challenge that you want solved, drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching.